Hi, I'm Alondra Markman. The thing I should say first, probably the most important thing about me, is that I'm an avatar for healing. As we're in the room together, as I'm receiving your attention, sharing some of my experience, leave some room for miracles to happen, because they do. Like Arkheim, I'm a very old soul. We've been incarnating on the Earth realm in many forms for a long time, way before any of the secret space program stuff existed. And as such, we have gifts and we carry certain potentials from the realms beyond incarnation, which can bring a lot of blessings to this time and place. And it's infinite, it's unlimited. You don't have to believe in it for it to work. It just happens. It's part of natural organic reality. And in my view, that's a big part of why we're here. I mean, yes, for information, for disclosure, but also for enlightenment, for healing, for things that we can't explain, improving the quality of our lives. That's why I'm here anyway. So let's leave some room for that, because as I'm talking through stuff, there's lots of potential for downloads, uploads, side loads, whatever kind of loads that can really integrate with your being and put you and put all of us on a higher timeline. So for me, that's what it's all about. There are infinite potentials, and we're exploring a lot of them, and a lot of them that we're speaking about are intensely traumatic, intensely conflictual. We want to all move together to timelines where we evolve peacefully. That's what I want. I'm assuming you want that since we're here. So I'm serving as a conduit for these things to happen. So I just want to name that so that it's consciously in the space. So I'll get into some of my own story here. In terms of this incarnation, Montauk is where it starts. That's the picture on the screen. This is the radar tower, the Sage Tower at Camp Hero, Montauk. This is from our trip, recent 2023, that Arkheim and Brian and myself and some others here were on. So in the picture, it's myself in the yellow and Arkheim in green, and that's James Rink in the pink shirt. We all wore bright colors that day. So this is kind of where a lot of the timelines intersect. This tower has sort of surpassed itself. It's now an emblem of a lot of other things, a lot of interdimensional potentials, a lot of different timelines, high and low. I just wanted to share some pictures of some places that are really pivotal for my story because it helps ground the energy and bring things into focus. So all the pictures on my slides, most of them are my own pictures. A few of them are aerial views from other people. But this is all just my direct experience. So it's all going to be real images, real places, just to ground it in. And these places, most of them serve as nodes where different timelines meet. So there are some places on the Earth, some of them are natural, some of them are artificial, where different timelines converge and beings from different dimensions encounter each other, where the veils are thin, as they say. So the eastern end of Long Island, Montauk Beach, Montauk Point, is naturally one of those places. This is why Camp Hero is there. The Satanists are very, very tuned in to all the subtle energy stuff. They're on top of their New Age game. They're really into all the subtle energy stuff. They know about star seeds, and they take it really seriously. They take it much more seriously than mainstream culture does, because they want to manipulate it. One of those instances is this radar tower. Most of you have heard about this already, so I'll be brief. Officially, this was created during the Cold War, as a lookout point in case any Soviet aircraft or submarines would show up in the Atlantic off the coast of New York. So they have this very, very high-powered radar tower. And as most of you know, there was a trip chair made from mostly Zeta Reticulin technology, which was at the base of this structure that we're looking at. And several of us in the room are survivors of trips through the chair. I see at least 4 or 5 of us in this room. I went through the Montauk experience through several different lenses and at least 2 different bodies, maybe more. The first body was different from this one. I was named Max. I was born on Long Island in 1970. I came to Montauk in 1974. And I started going through the trip chair in 1975-76. So that's the first experience. That's the first timeline. But then the person who's standing in front of you, this body mind, this is a different one. I'm Alondra again, hello. And I have Max's consciousness inside me, integrated with me. So I'm basically representing at least 2 people and many timelines as I'm talking to you. So Max went through Montauk in the 70s. Alondra went through Montauk in the late 80s and early 90s. Now how can that be possible when, on this timeline, the primary timeline, Montauk was shut down in the 80s, right? That's the official story. And it's what you see. I mean, you can go to Camp Hero today, and you see the abandoned base. You see that things have been shut down for a long time. There's a lot of video evidence from Preston Nichols, Duncan Cameron, Al Bielek, people that have already come up. They have a tremendous amount of video evidence going back to the 80s, so you can see the way it was. You can see that the base was shut down by the time the 90s came around. However, both myself and Arkheim, at least, have memories of going through Montauk in the 90s, even the early 2000s. What's going on there? The shortest explanation that I can think of is alternate timelines. There's also the fact that there's still activity going on underground in the base. So I want to honor that and honor the people that are probably still there right this moment. We went through horrific torture, we were cloned, and other types of doubles were created of us. So not just physical clones, but also holographic images and different kinds of doubles, time doubles. So in addition to biological clones, there are doppelgangers. So this all gets very complicated. I just wanted to start with this picture because this kind of grounds everything in, and it's all true at the same time. It's true that the base shut down in the 80s, and it's also true that we were there in the 90s, being tortured, being shown 90s movies. I remember you talking about Casper, specifically, The Friendly Ghost. That was a movie that we were tortured while watching at Montauk in the 90s and early 2000s. So it continued on that timeline, and that timeline touches on our timeline. Other speakers have touched on this as well, that the timelines are not fully independent of each other. They run into each other quite a lot, especially at places like Montauk, or closer to here, places like Saratoga, nodes in the earth where things naturally, where the veil is thinner, where the timelines are more likely to meet. I'll share a little bit about this trip. So this was my second Montauk trip as a free person. So I was enslaved on this timeline from my birth in 1986 up until 2003. If you want to talk about the other timelines, then it starts in 1970 and it goes beyond 2003 into the present and into the future. But for simplicity's sake, for this body mind, we're going to say 1986 to 2003. My first visit to Montauk as a free person was in 2020. I'm going to show some pictures from that initial trip. So this was during the pandemic. It was kind of fun because we were some of the only people willing to travel. I traveled a lot during the pandemic. I went coast to coast. It was one of the best times of my life, actually. Just incredible. I mean, empty roads, just wonderful. One of the places I went was Montauk, and we actually managed to climb to the roof of the radar tower. I don't recommend this. It's very sketchy, a lot of missing steps. We had to be very acrobatic and use our parkour training to get up there. Fortunately for us, we had a young man with us. What was that guy's name? A teenager who was actually a parkour expert in the here and now. So he helped us get past all those missing steps. Evan, yeah, he was awesome. So we very precariously dangled from the handrails, literally pulling ourselves up with our arms. Do not recommend this, unless you really want to get into some parkour and you know what you're doing, because this place is rotting and the staircase is almost gone. But miraculously, we made it to the top. So this is the view coming out, getting to the top of the Sage Radar Tower. And here's the view from the top. It was really pretty. So looking out into the Long Island Sound from the top of the radar tower. We had a little ritual up there. I brought some of my dad's ashes with me. He passed away the year before, 2019, and I scattered some of his ashes from the radar tower. And that was really meaningful for me. And I heard someone say they saw an angel shape in the ashes as they were dispersing. You can't make this stuff up. Well, you can, but I'm not. One thing I wanted to point out are some of the connections between Montauk and a lot of other different, especially Air Force bases around the world. So a little background, both sides of my family, Air Force intelligence. Before the Air Force, it was the Army. So I come from a military family going back a long ways, mostly Southwest Texas on my dad's side. And on my mom's side, they go back to Hungary. The Hungarians are actually very, very involved with Montauk as well. And Budapest was one of our big destinations on missions quite frequently. So I was a prime target for the whole Montauk experience. Air Force, Texan family on my father's side, Hungarian, Catholic, really Satanist family on my mother's side. So coming from a satanic Luciferian, more properly I guess, coming from Luciferian family on my mother's side and Air Force family on my father's side, I was in it before I had any knowledge or choice about anything. My soul was like, oh, I'm going to Montauk, okay. So I just want to point out a few connections that haven't been spoken about very much. One of them is with McClellan Air Force Base. So this picture was taken inside the Montauk Tower. We got to see a lot of the rotting equipment. And this sticker clearly says Sacramento McClellan Air Force Base. That was another one of the locations of what's called Project Phoenix, or the Montauk Project. McClellan Air Force Base is located in Sacramento, California. This is Northern California. I live pretty close to there today. I live in Mount Shasta. It's about 3.5 hours north of Sacramento. And I went back to the base and I took some of my own pictures. You won't believe what happened to it. The Air Force pulled out in the early 2000s, and I have a lot of personal stories about that. I was in this base till the very end and had some of my most traumatic experiences there. What they did was they handed it over to the county and they made it a business park. This Air Force base where a lot of us were tortured, where literally Draco were walking around. When I visited there, there was a girls' volleyball team having a tournament. And it's like really surreal, like completely dissociated. I don't know how they don't sense the energy. I'm sure some of them do, the more sensitive ones. Today, much like Camp Hero, you're able to walk around the space freely. There's no security. It's a public place. So this was one of the main hangars, and now it's CAL FIRE, so that's the fire management team in California, and they have some of their planes launching from these hangars now. But when I was there, up until around 2002 to 2003, that's when the base was converted. Up until that point, it was very, very actively part of Project Phoenix, and I had horrific torture personally in this exact building, which is now, a public works building. The cognitive dissonance is very intense. This is another place where the timelines kind of overlap. I can go there in the present, and I can see it's not a dangerous place in the present. It's a place where people are playing volleyball, and there are some fire management planes and other things that are pretty innocent. And at the same time, I'm aware that on several other timelines, this place is still being used to torture people. Just take a moment with that. And to me, that's all very real. I have simultaneous memory of all these other timelines, and I can speak about them in some detail. I'm not going to do that right now for the sake of time, haha. But I just wanted to bring these images into your awareness just to share this really intense field of experiences, which is part of my awareness, and now it can be part of your awareness, and hopefully we can start to get this stuff out into broader awareness. This is another hangar from the McClellan Air Force Base, now the McClellan Business Park. Also a place where I went through intense torture, and there were Zeta Reticulin craft inside this hangar. You'll just find normal planes there now, and you can walk in whenever you want. This is a picture from when it was still an Air Force base. This is not my picture. This is a little bit earlier. One of the times that I would have been there, where you can see the transport planes. Not everybody there was like a mind control slave. So coming back to my personal story, this was my home address for this body, this time and place, 1986 to 2003 person that is currently speaking. This was through my mother. I grew up with my mother, the Luciferian, from the Luciferian family. And this is where I grew up. If you know the Satanists, you know they love numerology. 13 St. Mark's Place, come on. It's like one of the most brilliant occult magic locations they could have picked. So this is where they set my mother up, and this is where I grew up with my mother. Those red doors are just very striking. Unfortunately, they're not there anymore. This picture is from when I was growing up in the 80s. So this is another location where I was very intensely abused, raped, tortured, trafficked, made to rape and kill other people. This is one of the places. And it's also a place where a lot of different timelines meet. The East Village of New York City is a very lively place. It's another one of these earth nodes where the veils are thin. A lot of kooky things happen in this neighborhood. Always have, always will. It's part of the natural grids of the earth. Again, Satanists are very drawn to these kinds of places because they want to exploit that energy. They want to use it, turn it to their advantage. So this happens to be a very powerful node. I just wanted to introduce it so you can see where I'm coming from in a tangible way. That was my apartment on the 4th floor with my mother. That was the door. But this is where I was actually conceived. My birth certificate says New York City. However, I was actually conceived a little bit west of Topeka. So in the area around Topeka, central Kansas, eastern Kansas, were these missile silos. These were originally housing Atlas series missiles during the Cold War. And a lot of them are now abandoned. A few of them are actually for rent on Zillow, if you don't mind some really bad vibes and you want a lot of space. In one of these missile silos that had basically been converted to a breeding facility, that's where I was conceived. I was part of the Air Force breeding projects, Air Force and Draco breeding projects. I'm a hybrid with Zeta and Alpha Draconian and some other things that I'm still figuring out. So at this missile silo, obviously this is as it looks today. Most, they're abandoned, they're run down, but I don't have any pictures from when I was there at the time. That would be crazy if I did. I'm sure they're in some file somewhere. I have some Freedom of Information Act requests out there. Maybe I'll get something eventually. But anyway, this is what it looks like today. This missile silo near the town of Erskine, Kansas, near Topeka, and it's where I spent my first roughly 15 hours of being alive. Was in this place. I went there as an adult. It has a very obvious name, so it was easy to find. Probably didn't have this name during the Cold War. They wouldn't want you to know where it is. I went there recently as I was traveling, and this is one of my pictures. Literally, Missile Base Road goes out to this missile silo. I gotta tell you, it felt really good in my body-mind to come to this place. Some soul retrieval was able to happen there. There's something about your birthplace that's very powerful. So I just wanted to share that. My address of birth was on Missile Base Road. And I wanted to share also a few other places connected to Montauk that haven't been talked about very much. Although my friend John Whitberg, some of you know him, he's great. He's mentioned a few of these places, but I want to show you some pictures because I was there too. This is Fort Worden in Washington State. A lot of us Montauk kids went here as well, probably most of us. There was a portal set up here as well, and a different kind of trip chair and a bunch of other equipment. It's a really beautiful spot. They pick beautiful spots for these things. Yeah, you can see the water out there. Another Cold War military installation. And then another one, I'll point out a few others. This one is the Edward Hebert Defense Complex in New Orleans. Another Montauk site, and another one that John mentioned. I had totally forgotten about this one. But I actually lived in New Orleans for a very long time. Part of the reason I was drawn there was because the energy was very familiar to me. It was another one of those very close to my heart kind of places. If you know New Orleans at all, you know it's in its own time zone. You don't even have to believe in any of the super soldier stuff to know that. So this was a naval base. It's at 4400 Dauphine Street. It's still there. It's abandoned. It's actually pretty easy to get into. I didn't say that. And this was another place that was manned, womaned by Zeta, by Draco, by high-ranking people of different branches of the armed services. So the Naval Air Force is also very involved in a lot of Project Phoenix stuff. So this is a naval base in New Orleans, just to bring it into our awareness. There's a lot to say about all these things. This is where my dad is from. I mentioned they're from Texas, but he grew up here, Wiesbaden Army Airfield. My father grew up speaking German. A lot of his family were on this air base, which comes out of World War II. Not so much directly connected to Project Phoenix, but some related projects. This is in central western Germany. And then another one, Pine Gap, Australia. Not my picture, but another place where I spent a pretty substantial amount of time growing up. I actually loved Australia. I have an alter who's got an Australian accent who came out recently. And I was like, what the hell's going on? I just woke up and I was like, everything was in an Australian accent. And it turns out it's from this part of me who still believes they're probably 6 years old and serving at Pine Gap. They're confused. They think that's the present. And it sort of overlaps. So I have this inner alter who's confused and thinks the past is the present. But then also I have a parallel timeline version who actually is there in the present and enslaved there in the present. So that gets really, really confusing. EMDR is pretty helpful, by the way. It's do bilateral stimulation, do. If you can get a therapist that even halfway believes you, I do recommend it. So that's another place very, very connected to these projects. Okay, then I want to get a little more personal and just talk about some family stuff. So my mother, she was enslaved from birth, used as a sex slave as a child herself. This goes way back in my family, at least 3 or 4 generations. My mother started to get some of her memories back, and they called her crazy and they locked her up in a psych hospital. This is Manhattan Psychiatric Hospital. She was locked away in hospitals from the time that she started remembering when she wasn't supposed to, and she was given electroshock therapy. So the Luciferians use this on people relentlessly, but it's also a publicly acknowledged mental health treatment because the cults basically control the hospitals. So my mother went through both the below ground and the above ground versions of electroconvulsive therapy, unfortunately. While I was still a child, eventually they decided it wasn't working. She was killed, and a clone was put in her place, and the clone could barely function. So my mother was barely functional. For a lot of the last years of her life, she was a permanent resident, or her clone was a permanent resident at this facility. You can see it's very warm and inviting, and that's where her clone passed away last year. A lot of this is clearing up for me very recently and in the present. So organic time has its own cycles, which cannot be perverted or subverted. As much as they try, they can't do it. There are aspects of the natural flow of time that just are. They're too big for any one party to dominate, thank goodness. Tuning into that organic flow of time has been really, really grounding for me, and it's something I help other people to do, those of us who are survivors of these projects. I can help get you grounded in organic time. I can help you stop getting taken if you're still getting taken against your will, and to really bring this timeline into a higher manifestation. So those are some of the gifts that I have. And then this is where I presently live, Mount Shasta, California. So Mount Shasta is another one of those places that's just a vortex of different stuff, interdimensional beings coming and going, extraterrestrials, intraterrestrials coming out of the earth. It's a really good meeting place for all these different beings. And yes, the shadow government has its stuff going on there, but then also you have the positive ETs coming and going. This is one of my pictures of Mount Shasta. It has these lenticular cloud formations. A lot of people believe that craft conceal themselves in these lenticular clouds that form around the mountain. I was helped through my experience, especially by the Antarians. These are 8th density, usually show up as dog-headed extraterrestrial beings. They showed up at Montauk quite a lot, and they showed up in a lot of these other places. They've helped me maintain my sanity. They have saved my life in a very literal sense on at least 4 occasions. That's part of why I'm standing here before you, is because of my Antarian guides. So Antares is in the Scorpio constellation. It's the heart of the Scorpion. And these are beings that are above good and evil, so they've already evolved beyond having this conflict between good and evil. They're in a better place where they've integrated good and evil. So they work through me a lot. I call my business Antarian Journeys because I'm working with them for most of the things that I do. I can help clear any kind of mind control, including satanic ritual abuse, secret space program service, and much more. Oh.